Bigger talks, bigger talks. We're back again with another phenomenal episode. And I have the joy and the privilege to have our next guest, Erika Anderson, coach, consultant, and business thinker, also an author and just an executive, mindful, fulfilling, strategic, educated uh individual. So we're going to talk about a lot of things. Her most recent book is Change from the Inside Out, making you, your team, and your organization change in a more capable way. So, Erika Anderson, welcome to the Bigger Talks podcast. How are you today? Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm great. And what a good introduction. Yeah, you should just always introduce me.
Hey, they say if you got it, then you got it. Then all you need is some acknowledgement. So you worked and put yourself in a position to get that intro. So where do we start? I mean, I think first and foremost, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Rick Brandon, who I got referred to you from him, and now you're on the podcast. So phenomenal, powerful people in the business sector. It's miracle season. That's my brand name and scope, but it's a miracle to get to meet and connect with high intellectual business people and just people that are phenomenal in their whole genre of life. So Erika, talk to us. Where are you from, and where did the journey for self-development and evolve and start change? Where did your change start? Where you get to
Oh man,
where
what
you
a
are now?
wonderful question. So as we were talking a little bit before you hit the record button, I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, right in the middle of the Midwest. And it was really interesting because my parents were very, they were kind of conservative fiscally, but they were very liberal socially. And really I was raised in the 60s in Nebraska with very specific intentional conversations about civil rights, about women's rights, about like I remember once when I was 10, so we were 8, 10, 12, and 15, kind of the 4 kids of which I was one. And we grew up in Nebraska where there weren't very many people of color. It's all white people in Nebraska pretty much, right? And so we were going to go on a vacation. We had a trailer, that we took behind our car. We're going to go on a vacation down to the South. And our parents sat us down beforehand and told us about racism and said, you're going to see a lot of terrible things. You're going to see when we'll stop at gas stations and the bathrooms in the gas stations will say whites only. And then there'll be a black, a thing that says colored people, and it's an outhouse. And they said, we look at this, notice this is wrong and bad. Yeah. This is 60 years ago. They're telling us this stuff, right? So it was a kind of a remarkable upbringing, and in lots of ways, and all 4 of us then kind of just went to the coasts. My older brother went to LA, and my older sister and my younger brother and I ended up in New York. And we kind of had to. I'm not sure we could have stayed in Nebraska in a way, Yeah. So, but starting out like that, and my dad especially was so curious and really encouraged us to be curious and to think deeply and to not accept what we saw in front of us if it didn't feel right to us. So, I mean, you asked, and so that's where my life started, and I feel like it was a wonderful start to life. And so for the last 70 years, I've been asking why. Yeah. And so, these books that I've written, I was saying this to somebody the other day, the reason I write a book is I get curious about something.
Curiosity.
And with change, what I got curious about, we've had it in my company, Proteus, we've had a change practice for over a decade, but I kept noticing how hard change was for people, And then I got curious about that. Why is change so hard for us, especially change that's kind of imposed on us, like when you're in an organization, people are making you change. And then I also got curious about so change is hard. So how do we actually change? What actually happens inside an individual human being when we go through a change? Because I felt like if I found good answers to those 2 questions, it would be really helpful. So that was kind of the genesis.
Yeah, and so let's talk about change. Why is it hard for us to change, and how do you change to get ahead and have effective results, because
Yeah,
we change every day with this, with the climate, with the days, with, just
yeah,
emotions. But how do
yeah.
we, like, why is it so hard for people to change? Why is that a challenge?
Okay. Yeah. Why is it hard? And then how do we get better at it?
Yes.
That's what I was trying to
Accept
say.
and change, right?
Yeah, exactly. So here's what I started to think about it. So whenever I'm trying to answer a question like that, I always look at our history as human beings because, we are what we have been kind of and what we've learned to be. So if you think about, okay, a person 100, 200, 500 years ago, anywhere in the world, in the United States, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, that person's life a couple hundred years ago would have been to us unimaginably stable, right?
Absolutely.
They almost certainly grew up in the same place their parents grew up, ate the same food, went to the same church, did the same work, and even the changes that happened, the small changes were predictable. There's a bad year for crops, or somebody has a baby, or somebody dies. It was all just unimaginably predictable. And when a real change occasionally did happen, it would have almost always been bad, a famine or
Mm,
a flood or a war, right? So the
interesting.
best bet for human beings until very recently is like, okay, when a change comes, get back to the previous state as soon as you possibly can. Go back to the known, right?
Right.
So think about it. That's how we're all wired for
And is
thousands
the
of years.
back, is the known, is that more of a safe space or a more fearful
Yes,
place that protects us from changing? So can
yes,
you kind
yes.
of give us an
Both.
example of something like that for an individual?
Yeah, like imagine 100 years ago, somebody, or 200 years ago, and I live in Philadelphia,
Hmm.
and there's a flood, a really terrible flood. And my house gets washed away, and everybody's house gets washed away. Okay, we are going to try to go back to the way it was before the flood as soon as we can, as soon as possible.
Oh.
Rebuild, grow the crops, make sure everybody's safe. We're going to go back to that previous known pre-flood state, right?
Wow. So you're saying we're going back to normalcy, or what the norm was. And that's
Exactly.
actually, you just helped me understand, when things like that happen in our world, it's actually the universe telling us it's time to change that format, or the
Exactly.
norm is time to change and shift, right? It's like shifting your paradigm,
Exactly.
because the
Exactly.
event is trying to
And
get you to say, no, don't go back like we had the pandemic. Yeah, it's
we got
no
to go
normal. We got to change. Ah, that's
precisely.
good.
And the pandemic is such a great example. I've been dealing with all these executives, and a lot of the senior executives, especially the older ones, especially the guys, they want
Yeah.
to go back to like, okay, now everybody's going to come back to work 5 days a week. And I'm like, no, they're not.
Yeah.
They're just not going to do it, and you're going to lose your best people if you try and make them. But there's that. Ooh, we got to go back to the way it was in 2019. No, I'm sorry, that ship has sailed. We're never going to go back to that. So we have to rewire ourselves to get better at moving forward, at changing,
and,
right?
and it's beautifully the way you said it, because it makes so much sense why progress is necessary, not only for change but for development. So with
Yes,
that being said, with that explanation, which was perfect, how do we get comfortable accepting that it's time to
yes,
change? What
yes,
state emotionally or mentally we have to be in to have the right perspective to move forward, and not like trigger our own selves with our own self-imposed
yes.
pressure and fears?
We'll come back. Yes, that is my favorite question. I love that you asked that, Eric.
Yeah.
Oh, and this is tangential, but I want to say it. So in Spanish, there's this wonderful word tocayo, or
Takayo.
tocayo, and
Takayo.
it means somebody who shares your name. So since I'm Erica and you're Eric, we're each other's tocayos.
Ah, Takayos. I like that. The E's for energy.
Uh,
Excellence.
anyway, okay, so here's the answer. So when I started thinking about like really observing and doing research, like what happens when somebody goes through change. So we came to understand that it's this thing that we have now called the change arc, because you know how an arc is, it gets harder going up and then it's easier coming down. So
Yeah.
the beginning of the change arc is what we call proposed change. And what that means is when a change comes at you, almost without exception, we want to know three things. And the first thing we want to know, this is how we go through change. The
Yeah.
first thing we want to know is, what does this mean for me?
Ah, good. That's great.
right?
Yes.
What am I going to have to do differently? What impact is this going to have personally on me? That's always our first question.
Yes.
And then if you think back to the beginning of the pandemic, well, what does this mean for me? Am I going to have to wear a mask? Am I going to have to get a vaccine? Right?
Yeah.
So then the second question is, why is this happening? Because we have such a strong preference for the status quo, it's like, give me a really good reason. Give me a reason why I should change. So that's the second question, is why.
Okay. Why?
And the third question is, what will it look like when the change has been made? I want to get a picture of the future, because, you know, one of the interesting things when I was writing the book, I found out that a lot of psychiatrists and neuropsychologists think now that our deepest fear is fear of the unknown, which
Yes.
completely makes sense given all we were just saying before about how we're wired.
Yeah.
And so if you tell somebody they're going to have to make a change, but you don't tell them what it's going to look like afterwards, that's terrifying. That's like just walking into the dark at night, right?
Yeah.
So those are the three things we want to know. What does this mean for me? Why is it happening? And what will it look like when it's done? So the questions that people start asking when a change is, you know, imposed upon them, it's all about that. What does that mean for me? Why is it happening? What will it look like? And because we have this kind of negative mindset about change, even as we're asking those questions, we already are making negative assumptions about the change.
Yes.
And what we assume, right? What we assume is that the change is going to be difficult and costly and weird.
Yes. Costly
right?
for sure, and weird, absolutely. And
Yes.
is some of confirmation bias is in within
Yes,
change?
absolutely.
Because it's
We
like
act-
we want to make it make sense for whatever we're going. So I'll share something briefly. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
just recently cut my hair. I had a lot of hair, almost had dreadlocks, and I had my hair for 4 years. But prior to those 4 years, I always had like a haircut, you know, and it was fine. So I know spiritually speaking, my spirit was like, it's time to cut your hair because I
Right.
like to change. I want to change. I do not like staying the same.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I cut my hair, and then you go out in public and people say, oh my God. And the first question is, how do you feel? Do you like it? And then it makes you question, how do you feel? Even if you know you feel okay because you've had a haircut before.
Yes.
So I got a cut, went to bed that night, woke up the next day, went in the mirror, like, oh snap, I got a haircut. Like
I have it all in my hair.
I'm different. And it's a process, even though it's subtle, you have to get over. But I'm
Yes.
okay because I'm okay with who I am. But I look at that in such a small spectrum of what people go through in like a divorce, a job promotion, losing someone close to them,
Yes. Yes.
uh, pandemic, that change of what
Let's
does
use
it mean? Yeah, what does that mean for me? Why? And what
yeah.
does this look like moving forward?
So let's use that as an example. So let's suspect that when you first started thinking about cutting your hair, you didn't do it at first because you thought it's going to be difficult, costly, and weird. Oh, it's
Yeah,
going to be, I'm not sure I can get it right,
yeah,
and it'll cost. And costly is interesting because it's not what people are worried about with change is not so much time and money. It's things like identity
yeah.
and
I need
right.
new photos. What am my
Yes,
Instagram gonna look like? How am I
exactly.
gonna come off to the public? Oh, I'm wearing
Yes.
snapbacks again.
Yeah.
How often do I get a haircut?
Precisely. Identity, reputation,
Yeah,
relationships. It's like it's going to cost me these things that are
yeah,
valuable to me. And weird is just like, oh,
yeah.
that's not how I do it, you know?
Right. Yes.
Right. And so then what we noticed is when, and I'm sure you came to this point in your hair saga,
Yeah.
when people decide to make a change or decide they're okay with a change, it's almost never because something externally changes. It's because their mindset shifts
Yes.
and they start thinking to themselves, oh, this could be easy versus difficult, or it could be at
Yes.
least doable, right? Could be easy, could be rewarding, could give me more than it takes away.
Yeah.
And it could be normal. Could be normal to have my hair completely different. I used to have it like that.
Yeah.
Other people have it like that. That's normal,
That's
right?
normal. Right.
And that's why the book's called Change from the Inside Out. I realized that it's this interior mindset shift
Interior mindset.
that is the heart of making a change. And when an individual human being starts thinking, oh, this could be easy, rewarding, and normal, then they're willing to do it. They're willing to do the behaviors, to take the steps, to do the things that the change requires.
Right.
You saw it at the beginning of the pandemic. I remember when, I read this article early on. It was in March of 2020 about social distancing. And I remember reading the article and going, that's weird. We can't do that. That's costly. That's difficult, And then I reread it and I started to go, yeah, gosh, this is good science this guy's talking about. Maybe we do need to do this. And by the end of the day, I was like, okay, we're going to close the office and we're going to see what happens. And, nothing changed externally, just my mindset
Internally,
shift.
yeah, your mindset.
Right?
And with change, with all your research and with your books written and stuff, is there some stats on how long it takes a person to change or get through a process of change? Does it take weeks? Does it take months? Does it take hours? Or maybe it's just it varies based on the individual. What does that
The
look like?
actual change takes a moment.
Yeah, I learned in the NLP, some changes happen in an instant.
Yes, that moment when you go, oh, okay, I guess this could be, but then, sometimes it takes weeks or even months. It's so individual and it's so personal and dependent on how stuck the person is when they start, right?
Yeah.
But it can happen in a moment. I mean, haven't you had conversations with people where they're going kind of no, 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 and all of a sudden they're like, oh, maybe, oh, yes.
Oh yeah, I never looked at it like that.
Right?
Oh, interesting
And
perspective. Yes.
yes. And so one of the things, so then that's the first couple of chapters of the book. So then we talk about how do you help people go through that change arc?
Yes.
And so one of the statistics that I talk about in the book is that McKinsey has a bunch of data that shows that most organizational change efforts fail. 70% of them fail.
70%?
70%.
Why?
Isn't that crazy?
Well,
it is a lot. And by fail, they mean fail to achieve the marks, kind of like maybe they don't fail altogether, but they don't make the money. It doesn't help the organization in the way, but so they don't work the way you hope they will. 70%, right?
Yes.
And if you dig down into that data a little bit more, it turns out that the main reasons for that are lack of management support and employee buy-in. They haven't gone through their change arc, right?
No change arc, yeah.
And they're just like, no, I don't think so. I don't believe it, right? So we have this 5-step change model that is a wonderful, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think it's a great way to integrate the practical nuts and bolts things you have to do to make a change while helping all the individuals who are involved through that mindset shift, through that change up.
Yeah, and it's beautiful because I think with all of that, you go through the process of internally the interchange arc changing.
Yeah.
Then you change. My question is, once you change, there's so much uncertainty, right? So as an individual, how does one get comfortable with uncertainty that exists in that moment? So say, for instance, a young kid coming out of college, he knows he's going to be drafted into the NBA, but he doesn't know where he's going to go. Now he automatically is changing because he's getting drafted to go to the pros, but he's so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
Is there even way to feel comfortable, or you're dating someone for 6 months and then it's at some time it might time for the relationship, but it's so much uncertainty because you don't know what's next, but you're in it.
Yes.
How do you get comfortable in uncertainty after you change over a period of time?
Oh, I love that question. So I think it comes back again to mindset.
Okay.
If you're like, one of the things I talk about in the book is if you look at books on change that were written 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, they kind of act like, all right, so we're just going to do this one change. We're going to pick the organization up, we're going to shake it around, we're going to put it back down again, and then we're done,
Yes.
And so it's, give a man a fish versus teach him how to fish. And so in our approach and in my book, I say the subtitle, making you, your team, your organization more change capable, better at going through that uncertainty. So as you get better at kind of shifting your own mindset, it's this wonderful thing where, okay, so let me talk about mindset. So that we all talk to ourselves all the time, right?
I do it all day, every day.
We all do. It's like that little chyron that runs at the bottom of the news feed. It's like we're just saying stuff to ourselves all the time, right? And some of it is pretty benign. It doesn't really matter. It's like, I like oranges. It's really hot today. That guy has a big nose. We just say all kinds of random stuff to ourselves all the time. But some of the stuff we say to ourselves, especially stuff about change, is really unhelpful. We reinforce that, oh, this is going to be really like, let's use your example of a kid who gets into the NBA and hasn't the faintest idea what that's going to be like. Okay, so his self-talk could be, oh my God, this is going to be really hard. And I'm not going to know anybody. It's going to be terrible. And, just turning that uncertainty into negativity, into difficult, costly, weird, right?
Yes.
Or he could say, wait. I really don't know if it's going to be good or bad. I know I'm a good football player, a good basketball player. I know that I'm sure they must have ways to onboard new people. I know how to ask good questions, right?
Yeah.
So you can talk to yourself in ways that acknowledge the uncertainty and say, what can I do about it? Versus going, oh, this is going to be horrible and I don't have the faintest idea.
So I have a really, really deep question, and I don't know if you can answer it, but I want to ask it because with that being said, I'm thinking, okay, cool. You just helped me understand the conversation you have in your mind about uncertainty. You can change it. So therefore, if you can change it to a more positive versus a negative, does that mean you attract better or more or better outcome versus if you were in your negative? Because I always think about how we attract people into our life and in our vortex. So I'm thinking like a player like that who has the right mindset and perspective about where he potentially can go. If you look at it like a more positive outcome, does his outcome be more positive if it doesn't work out, or does it become negative? Like, does that basically what I'm saying, does that alter the outcome based on the thoughts and the mentality?
I love that question. And yes, my observation is if I can get my self-talk, how I'm talking to myself about an unknown situation, if I can get it just to neutral, because if you make it too positive, then you're going to be all disappointed.
You're not being real,
right? You're not being real. Exactly right. You want to be a fair witness. So you get it to neutral. So that kid who's in the NBA, the proper thing for him to be saying to himself was, I don't know. And I'm going to do everything I can to make it work. And here's what I do know. I'm a good athlete. They had confidence in me. I know that's true. I already know this one guy who I like. The things that, if you're going to say positive things, they have to be believable. They have to be real, right? And then everything else, you just say neutral. It's so good to get to neutral about change, because then, to your point, you're open for what comes.
So in a nutshell, you just explained when it's uncertainty, because you answered that question in so many different ways that I got different answers coming through. It's best to be neutral when uncertainty arrives and have a more neutral perspective and outlook, because therefore you can save yourself anxiety, stress, and create a better opportunity moving forward that's more certain.
Absolutely. That's a great way to summarize it. And it also, what I've noticed is when I can get myself neutral mentally about an uncertain situation, it's like there's less white noise in my head. There's less static, right? And so then I can actually observe what's really going on, and I can take advantage of the good stuff. There was this great guy. Did you ever hear of a guy named Branch Rickey? Do you know that name?
He sounds familiar. Branch Rickey. Who is he?
He was a real seminal figure in American baseball. He brought the first Black player and the first Hispanic player into the major leagues, and he kind of invented the farm team system. He was an amazing guy. And he said that he used to, I guess his saying that he used to like to say was, luck is the residue of design.
Ooh.
Isn't that a wonderful quote?
Elaborate on that. I love it. He just
Yeah.
twinkled my
Yeah.
toes.
Yeah.
Luck
So
is the
what that
residue of
means,
design. Interesting.
yeah. So what that means to me is people look at somebody and they go, "Oh, that person's so lucky." But what Branch Rickey was saying is, when you think somebody's lucky, it's just because they have the proper mindset, they have the proper orientation, they've thought through what they want to have happen, they've done that design inside their heads, and
Yes.
now they're open. And so when something wanders by that they can take advantage of, they take advantage of it because they can see it.
They can see it because they neutralize
Yeah.
the mind to
Right?
see it. Because I feel like when you're neutral, you can kind of see it from both ways and you don't stray
Precisely.
too
Yes.
strong, and you're able to have
Yes.
equilibrium and balance and say, you know what? I like
Yes.
this. This could happen, but I'm gonna be neutral and I'm gonna do the best I can. I'm gonna be open to the
Exactly.
outcome and I'm gonna let that determine where I go moving forward.
Precisely. And to you use the word confirmation bias before, if you're neutral, you don't get tripped up by your
Yeah.
confirmation
Yeah,
bias.
because that's the
You
confirmation bias we're
look at it.
always looking for. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. That's why they would do this and that. And honestly, that's why I go back to the question prior, that secures and verify confirmation bias when we think a certain way and then we think something, then it happens because we're looking for it and like, oh,
Yeah.
that's why they didn't call me back. Clearly. And so it goes back to attraction, right? What we're thinking, we attract. Thoughts
Exactly.
become things.
Exactly.
Our mind is
Exactly.
so powerful. It's amazing.
Our mind is powerful. My
Yeah.
my older brother, who sadly died last year, he was ill for a long time, and died. Such an amazing person. And he used to say, um, every head is a planet.
Wow.
And I totally agree with that. Like we're all creating our own reality all the
Yeah.
time. And so much of our experience of life is what's going on inside our head. And we don't realize how much control we have over
Yes.
what's going on inside our head and over how we see what's happening around us, right?
And it's interesting, God bless your brother's soul, because it's still here present to this day, because he just came up in this
Yeah.
conversation. Everybody here
Yeah.
is a planet. I love that. That's a quote. We should put it on a shirt. What planet it is, I don't know. Mars, Venus, Jupiter. uh, yeah, it's one of those things that I've discovered as an individual. I can control how I see things, right? If I change the way I look at things, the things I look at change. For
Yes.
me, growing up in a
Yes.
negative
Yes.
environment of Baltimore City, it was a lot of negativity in the environment. If I would attach myself or engaged in that energy of negativity, I will become it. But I
Yeah.
always said when I was a kid, it has to be something better than just this. Goes
Yeah.
back to the beginning. I was
Yeah.
curious,
Yeah. Yeah. You were
curiosity.
curious.
And so
You
that
were curious.
curiosity like neutralized my
Yeah.
thoughts and emotions to not be so vetted into that space because it was my environment, that I didn't become it, and allow me to push out and attract and do different and better things and have conversations like this today.
Yes, I 1,000,000% agree with you. There's a can't remember who it was, some Greek philosopher who said this wonderful thing, and then Eleanor Roosevelt picked up on it. But it's exactly what you're saying. He said, we can't always control our circumstances, but we can always control our reaction to those circumstances.
Yeah. And to feed off of that, I think the Napoleon Hill, maybe what's this guy? As a Man Thinketh, forgot the author. He said, "Man is willing to change his circumstances, but he's not willing to change himself. But if he's
Yes,
willing to change himself, his circumstances will change."
yes,
And it goes
yes,
back to your book,
yeah,
changing from the inside out.
exactly, exactly.
So
We can just keep going.
yeah. So with the book, now, is there any information about some people having a capacity to change more than others based on DNA, genetic, or psychological, like growth mindset versus fixed mindset? Is there some type of information on that, or is just more general idea of changing from your perspective?
So, as I say, it's like a fingerprint. Every person's ability to become change capable is impacted by so much. It's impacted by all the same things that lead to growth and fixed mindset, by your upbringing and how you think of yourself and whether or not you're willing to do the work to kind of break through your limitations.
Yeah.
It's so individual. So what I always try and do in my books is lay out a really practical path
Yes.
for whatever. Like in the Be Bad First book, it's how do you get to be a better learner? In the Change book, it's how can I become more change capable? And then I feel like I just offer it, and
Yeah.
an individual does what they can do, you know?
Right. And for you, how do you continue to grow and change? What is something you do in an intangible way every day that keeps you consistent on changing? Do you read a lot? Do you meditate? Do you pray? Do you go for walks? Do you work out? I think the listeners would love to know from someone so powerful as you are, because we only get to see what you show us, and we don't understand what you do when you're not showing us what you
Yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
you consist of. What do you do that help you change and grow and evolve in a productive way?
Oh man, these are such great questions, Eric. So one thing I do that's very specific is for the last 5 years, I've been learning to speak Spanish
Okay.
because it
Un
really,
poquito español.
yeah, yo puedo hablar español bastante bien ahora.
Sí,
So,
no comprende. I don't even know what she said.
and it's a great example because it goes up against not I think it's so much easier if people learn languages early in life, but in pretty advanced life, to learn a whole new language, it really runs up against all that difficult, costly, weird stuff,
Yeah.
and so I notice having to change my mindset every time. And what my husband and I have found a part of northern Spain that we really love, that I think we're going to probably buy a little place there, and almost nobody speaks English. So don't really have a choice. When I go there, I have to speak
Yeah.
Spanish,
You put
right?
yourself in a position where
And
you have to do it.
yeah, and it's a stretch. Every time it's a stretch. It's like that thing in you goes, but I don't know how to, what if
Yeah.
they think so that's a big one. And I work on it every day. And whenever I'm around somebody who speaks Spanish, I try and speak Spanish. And so that's a big one. But then just in general, I really try to, back to the beginning, stay curious and open about every change that comes my way. Whether it's with work, like I'm shifting my relationship to work some, I'm pulling back from the day-to-day running of my company, and my partners are running it now. And that's a big change. And
Yes.
watching my reaction to that and getting better at that. I just turned 70. So like,
Oh, you look amazing. You're not, I don't know what 70 looks like, but I wouldn't have thought that. You look incredible. Let's go, Erika.
oh yeah. So what is that? What's that shift, and what does that mean? And what does it mean to be kind of like a tribal elder in a way? And
Yeah.
there's so many things to be curious about and notice. And as you said at the very beginning, our lives change every day in ways big and small.
Yeah.
And so I just always try and practice what I preach.
Amen. Because I think and believe great change comes with great awareness. Being aware that you're changing and thinking about the change.
Yes.
So I want to, go back into change, but I want to go into the book previous to Change from the Inside Out is Be Bad First, Get Good
Yeah.
at Things Fast to Stay Ready.
Yeah.
So about 4 years ago, I hired a speech coach, a dialect coach. I'm from Baltimore, so we have strong accents. And so instead of saying Baltimore, we might say Baltimore. Instead of saying mother, we might say mother. So
Yeah.
going into, the one-on-one sessions, we're doing puh, buh, duh, la, right? And she's like, I guess she felt that I would feel ashamed. And I'm like, no, I want to get better.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, like over the course of the time, because I was so focused on changing certain words and consonants and finishing words and all these things, I was hyper focused. I thought I was making mistakes, right?
Yes.
However, when I did on camera interviews or things would happen, I'm like, wow, my language and my dialect and my diction is changing. But in the
Yes.
moment, it didn't feel that way because I felt like I was still struggling. So is there
Yeah.
some type of information or awareness or information you might have that there's a moment where no matter what you think you feel, eventually you're going to change because it's human nature, you're doing the work. 'Cause
Yes.
sometimes we
Yeah.
can't see the progress or the change because we're showing up every day, but we don't think we're doing as great as others see. Like the guy you said earlier, who neutralized his mindset, he's able to grab on opportunity, but people think he's lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So two things. I love this, and I do love about learning. In fact, when I decided to learn to speak Spanish, it was right after the Be Bad First book came out, because I thought I really need to practice what I preach. What's something that I can learn to do that I can use my skills. So two things, and I love your example is great. So the first thing is, again, self-talk, right?
Talk. Okay.
So the perfect self-talk, it turns out, for learning a new thing is a balance of saying two things to yourself. One is, I'm not good at this now,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And the other is, I can get good at this.
That's so good. It gives you
People,
faith. Yeah.
yes, people tend to over-index on one or the other. Some people just say, oh, I'm not good at this, and then that's all. And then they don't think they could do it, and they just, it bumps them out. Some people is like, I'm good at this. I'm already good. No, I'm bad at it now because I'm just starting. And I can get good. I'm capable of getting good at it. And if you just keep saying those two things to yourself in balance over, that's what moves you along that learning curve, right?
Yeah.
So that's thing one. And thing two is find somebody to spot you, because you said, when you listen to a video, then you're like, oh, I am getting better. When we're trying to learn, we have to have people in our lives who care about us, who are willing to tell us the truth, and who see us clearly, right?
Yes.
And then, because you can't see the spinach in your own teeth, right? You got to have people in your life who you can turn to and say, am I getting better at this? And if you are, they'll say yes.
Yep.
And if you're not, they'll say no, right?
Feedback is motivation, good or
Oh
bad.
my God. Yeah. Yes. And feedback is a partner of mine once told me, my first business partner, he used to say this great thing about feedback being the breakfast, lunch, and dinner of champions. And he said,
I like
is that great?
Yeah,
And
that's a bigger talks moment. What did
yeah,
he say that again? Feedback is the
the
breakfast,
breakfast, lunch,
lunch,
and
and
dinner
dinner
is
of
the champion.
champion. Woo!
And the reason he said that is because feedback is the only way we learn. And I said, Marty, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean? He said, okay, think about it this way. When a little kid is trying to learn to talk, it turns out that if a kid who can hear is raised by two deaf parents and there's nobody else in the environment, the kid won't learn to talk. Right? Because he won't get that feedback that all children get of like, oh, honey, did you hear? He said, mom, he said book, he said doggy, right? They don't hear that. So the kid doesn't get that feedback and doesn't learn to talk.
People, did you hear what she said? Feedback is the only way we learn. Interesting.
Right?
That's so true. I always would say feedback is motivation because you have naysayers and doubters, and then you have people who celebrate you and support you. It's still feedback, and you're
Yeah.
learning what to take in, how to process it, and then you're able to change.
Right. But think about all the things we learn when we're 0 to 5. We learn to talk, we learn to walk, we learn to interact with other people, we learn to eat. That only happens because we get feedback. Like when a kid stands up and tries to walk and then does something with their balance that makes them fall down, that's feedback.
Feedback.
And they get up and try it again and gradually learn how to balance themselves and move forward and do their arms and legs. That's all because they're getting feedback from the environment, from gravity. If a kid, again, like the kid with deaf parents, if a kid was in a weightless environment, they probably wouldn't learn how to walk because they'd never get that feedback, right?
Feedback. You need feedback from everything. The universe, parents, friends, the environment.
Yeah.
So just to give the people, the listeners, some feedback, how do individuals going through change, far as quitting a job, leaving a job, being promoted, new relationship, leaving a relationship, new opportunity, how do they embrace change, or what would your be advice in their moment? Because I feel like the people I'm talking about, they're kind of like in the middle of either their celebration or their chaos, right? Of changing and accepting it and going to the next level. Like, what is your first word of advice or intention for someone who's in a not an uncomfortable situation, but not so comfortable? Is a little uncertainty. They know they must change, but they're so afraid of changing. But even though they are changing,
Yeah. So again, I love that you asked this question. So it's interesting. We have this, I said before, and it's in the book, we have this 5-step change model that we use with organizations. But what I've been realizing recently is that it's great for individual change too. So let me just walk you through it. So let's say somebody is trying to decide whether or not to leave their job, right? And look for
hmm
another job.
yes,
Big change. A lot of people
big
think through
change.
this. Okay. So the first step of our model is called clarify the change and why it's needed,
Mm, I like that.
right? So before you just roll into it, some people just quit their job. I hate this job. It's like, hold up, hold up.
Hold up, yeah.
Really get clear about why you want to make a change and what that change would be. So really think,
Think about it.
really use your brain and think like, okay, do I not like this kind of work, or do I not like this company, or do I not like having a full-time? What do I not like about this that I actually want to change? So let's get real clear about what I want to change
Clarity.
and then why. Okay, I hate the toxic culture of this. Okay, that's a good why. Okay, so just get really clear about what's the change you're contemplating. Why do you want to make it? Okay, that's step one. Then step two is, and this is back to what we were talking about before, envision the future state. What would good look like?
Well, good.
Because a lot of times people roll into a change without having a clear idea of what they're really going for. Do I want to? So, what would good look like? It would be I'm working in an organization where I really care about the purpose of the organization and the people around are good people, and it's full time, but it's not like 60 hours a week. Okay. And it's in this part of the country, you just get as clear as you can about the future that you want, that you hope will
Yes.
happen if you make the change, right? So that's
Yes.
step two. And then step three is you build the change. You actually make a plan. Like, okay, what do I need to do? Do I need to get my resume out? Do I need to call a recruiter? Do I need to look online? What's the best way to find those jobs? How do I vet them? What kind of questions do I want to ask to make sure if it would line up with my future? So you build that
And that's a
plan.
great point. That's like building rapport with change.
Yes.
It's like you
Yeah,
building rapport with it. Like, okay, we know we're doing this. How do we build rapport in a positive, effective way to make
exactly.
it move to the next step?
Precisely. And then step four is we call lead the transition. So you actually do the things you said you were going to do, and you kind of manage your own mindset as you start to get freaked out. It's like, calm down. I've planned, I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm doing it. I know what I'm going for. I've got a plan in place that to make it seem more, easy, rewarding, and normal for yourself, right? And then you keep the change going. And if people approach change in that kind of planful way that balances their mental model and the practical things they need to do, I think that's the best way to go through change.
Yeah, because it's a process. It's
Yeah,
structure. You have structure around changing. You're not just changing because you feel an emotion or you were traumatized by a situation. You're kind of processing it, understanding it, and saying, okay, this is clear. I have some certainty here. I think I want to move forward. And then you
yes,
can see the future, right? Because
precisely.
some things
And
we
I,
can visualize, but in the moment, we probably can't see past that moment. Isn't that interesting? Like I can
yeah,
see myself in a place, but in a moment, I can't see that place the way I see it in my mind. If that makes sense, it's like if you're in the gym, I
if you can see the moment, then you can almost always build a path to that moment.
okay, that's good.
Right.
Good.
And I'll brag about my kids. So I have
Yeah.
three kids, two biological, one acquired. I have
hmm
three kids, two daughters and a son. And over the last year, they're all married, they all have kids. And over the last year, they've all moved. They've moved. My older daughter and her husband, their kids moved from upstate New York to Maine. My son and his wife and their kids moved from LA back to Brooklyn. My younger daughter, who's a doctor, is having to move to do a fellowship in her specialty. And they all approached it in this really planful way. They didn't just like, well, I guess we're going back.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
Yeah. Yeah.
they really thought about why are we doing this? what will it look like? What actually is the change? They made a plan. They got through the difficulties, and it's so cool because they've
Yeah.
all made these changes and they're really successful. And they did it like, as my son said to me, I did this like a grown-ass man. I didn't
Yeah,
just,
there you go. Preparation.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, Erica, this was a phenomenal discussion. Thank you for giving so much wisdom and information and insight. For the listeners, is there anything you want to share before we get off here? And how can we get this book? We need the book. Where do we find it? How do we purchase
Yes.
it? Is it an
Yeah, yeah,
ebook?
yeah.
Is it a physical copy? Should we come to your website? Let us know all the deeds.
Okay, so it's on Amazon and
Okay.
it's a hard copy, ebook, and audiobook, which I recorded. So you can
Oh,
listen to me
interesting.
talk
Okay.
from time to time. And you can go to my website, which is erikaanderson.com, ErikaAndersen, both spelled a little weirdly.com. And there you can find out about all the books and my podcast, and you can go from there
Oh
to
yeah.
my
What is your
company website.
podcast?
It's called the Proteus Leader Show.
Oh, and what's the synopsis of that? Real quick for
It's
us.
just a quick 15-minute kind of tips and insights for leaders and managers.
Got it. So people follow her, get the podcast, subscribe to that as well, buy the book.
Please buy the book. That would be good. And I think,
Yeah.
as I said, I write books when I get curious, but my main motivation for writing books is always to help people. I always want to share something that I think will be useful for people to create the lives they want to have.
That's absolutely. And we need that. I always say information changes situations.
Yeah.
And I feel like when we're lacking something, it's because we're lacking information. Or
Yes.
we don't have the right perspective on the thing we think we should do because we haven't made the plan. We just
Yeah.
jump to
Yeah.
conclusion because a thought or a scenario without really processing what that means and building that rapport of change. So, Erica, thank you for your time, your energy, and your essence. This was beautiful. This was another phenomenal Bigger Talks episode, and I'm pretty sure the listeners and everyone from all over the world will love this. And we need to follow you. You're on Twitter, right? Because you're not on Instagram, but
Yeah,
you're on
yeah.
Twitter.
Eric, I'm an early adopter on Twitter, so it's just
Yeah,
Erika Anderson.
got it. Well, that's it. That's all. People, Erika Anderson, she's phenomenal. The coach, the consultant, the business thinker, but she's all about changing from the inside out and helping you be capable with changing for yourself in your business, in your life. Thank you once again. Bigger Talks. We're out.